Hello and welcome back. I'm Clark Crawford here of Clark Crawford Sports here on YouTube. And today I'm going to get into the NFC NFL teams and where they're at on the season through 9 weeks of the year. Next week, I'll get to the AFC teams. I wanted to spend a little time speaking on each team. So here we go. Let's get started. First up, I'm going to start with the NFC East, and that will bring us to the Philadelphia Eagles. Now it's at the midway point for the Eagles. They sit at 8-1 on the year. Now, for me, don't let the Eagles record fool you. This is not quite the same team who, for the most part, steamrolled their way through the NFC last year, making the Super Bowl, but fell short to Kansas City in that Super Bowl. The biggest takeaway for me has been the offense has taken a step back, in my opinion, on that side of the ball. And what their bigger concern for me is, well, I think the Eagles' biggest loss of the offseason was losing offensive coordinator Shane Steichen to the Colts, who is now their head coach. Now, I think that was the greatest impact, and that's why the Eagles have taken a small step back on offense. Now, they're still one of the better offenses in the league, though the Eagles have not quite been the same team. Now, their defense is still up there with the better defenses in the league, and a couple of nice draft picks with Jalen Carter being the headline pick, number 9 overall. Now, the Eagles had a nice win against the Cowboys this past week. They almost choked it away, but they won. What's to come for the Eagles in the second half of the season? They have a tough schedule, which the Eagles are on bye week in week 10, which kicks off tomorrow. And they open up with Kansas City on Monday Night Football, probably one of the biggest games of the year on November 20th. The Eagles will be battle tested during the back half of their schedule in the coming weeks, so we'll quickly find out if this Eagle team is potentially going to be Super Bowl bound or their season may spiral out of control and their Super Bowl hopes will potentially go out the window as their season at that point would end in disappointment. Next up is the second team in the NFC East with the 5-3 record, and that would be the Dallas Cowboys. They've already had their bye week, and they come into week 10, as I said, with the 5-3 record. Even with the winning record, the Cowboys have had their fair share of ups and downs on the year. Their loss to Arizona was an embarrassing loss, one of the worst losses in the NFL this season. Arizona is 1-8. I mean, come on, Dallas. You should have won that game. I know Arizona's still an NFL team, but that's embarrassing. One of the worst losses, as I said, in the league. Now, Dallas is also coming off of a tough loss in Philadelphia where they had chances to win the game, but they came up short. You can't change the past, so Dallas needs to put that loss behind them and look forward to what's left of their season. They are definitely talented enough to get into the playoffs. My prediction is they probably get the 5 seed as they have regularly in the past few times they've been to the playoffs, and they have the potential to make some noise. But which Dallas team is going to show up in the playoffs? Because the Dallas teams that have shown up in the playoffs recently, they haven't been to an NFC title game since the 90s. So my best guess is Dallas maybe wins the wild card round because I have them in the playoffs, and then they will suffer some kind of crushing defeat or close loss in the divisional round of the playoffs as per usual. When they make the playoffs since the 90s, they lose in the wild card round or the divisional round. Now, Dallas does have, just like Philadelphia, a tough second half of their schedule. They still have to play Seattle, one more against Philadelphia, Buffalo, Miami, and Detroit. So Dallas has their work cut out for them, and so we'll see which Dallas team shows up. Is it the one who got blown out against San Francisco and Arizona, or the one who blew out the Rams a few weeks ago? Now, moving on to the third place team in the NFC East, that will be the Washington Commanders. They sit at 4-5 in the middle of the pack in the NFC. One thing to note about Washington is at the trade deadline, they traded away 2 of their better players on their team, both defensive linemen, as the first deal that was made was trading defensive end Montez Sweat to the Chicago Bears for a 2024 second round pick. This move was made because Washington was not going to pay Sweat, and he was due for a contract extension at the end of the year. The Bears gave him a massive 4-year extension that he was seeking, and he is now a Chicago Bear. The other trade that was made was dealing defensive end and former number 2 overall pick Chase Young to the 49ers for a future third round pick. They traded away, as I said, 2 of their better players, so it seems the Commanders could be headed for a rebuild. Maybe they're headed to fire their coach, who I think they should fire. The Commanders are really a confusing team in my mind. I don't know what they're doing with their future, and they, to me, don't have much to show for their future right now. Now, one thing I want to note is at least a big surprise, something to look forward for Commanders fans is Sam Howell, since week 5, has been a top 5 quarterback in the league. He deserves a shout out from me, proving the doubters wrong, including myself. As I said in an earlier video, I did not think Sam Howell was the answer at QB, but if he puts a few more good weeks together, he could very well prove that he could be at least a short term or maybe a franchise quarterback as an answer for the Commanders. But as I said, I think they need to start over, build the defensive side of the ball back up, and definitely fire Coach Ron Rivera and move in a different direction. In my opinion, they're unlikely to make the playoffs, and they probably won't. So better luck to the Commanders and their fans in 2024. Next up is the final team, 4th place team in the NFC East. That's the New York Giants. Also, I like to call the Giants the easiest team to predict from last season to not make the playoffs. They overachieved last season, and Brian Daboll's first year as coach, he did a nice job, but Daniel Jones overperformed what he's been as an NFL player so far. He's in his 5th year. The Giants are 2-7, and they can kiss their playoff hopes goodbye. If I'm the Giants, I'm tanking for a top 5 pick at this point. You're not going to make the playoffs. This team, even with the injuries, if they didn't have them, this football team is just not very good. The biggest mistake the Giants made was giving quarterback Daniel Jones a 4-year, $160 million extension in the offseason. He had one decent year out of his first 4 years, and you thought it was smart to give him $160 million guaranteed money? That was a crazy decision. The Giants, if it were me, I would have drafted a quarterback this past offseason, even if he's a rookie and he stunk. Well, to me, he'd probably be better than Daniel Jones, who's had his own injury concerns this year. So that puts a question mark on his future. The Giants' abysmal season is just feels like it continues to get worse and worse. The defense has also been atrocious. The offense has been atrocious. If I'm Saquon Barkley, I get as far away from New York as I can. If I'm him, I leave in the offseason, but it seems as though, from the reports I've heard, Saquon Barkley wants to stay in New York, which I think is a crazy idea. But hey, if Saquon wants to get paid the most, I'm sure the Giants will give him a ton of money. So to me, that means Saquon cares more about money than he does winning. But hey, I'm not a Giants fan, so Giants, good luck in 2024. The NFC North division leaders are the 6-2 Detroit Lions. In my mind, they're a top 5 team in the league right now, and the Lions are in the driver's seat to win their first division title in over 30 years. Now, I'm not a Lions fan, but I love what the Lions are doing. They're an exciting young team that they're building. Dan Campbell's really got this team believing in what they can do, and the Lions, they're a top 5 team, as I said. They're exciting, and trading away Matthew Stafford, I think, was the best decision they could have made when they did it. They brought in Jared Goff in that deal, and the picks they've gotten since then, as they also got other picks in that deal, have been terrific. They've drafted well over the past couple seasons, and Dan Campbell, I think, should be in the running and maybe the front runner for Coach of the Year as well. Jared Goff, since arriving in Detroit, has also been, in my mind, a top 12 quarterback. So the Lions really did well in that deal. Now all they need to solidify that deal to say maybe they possibly won that deal, as the Rams got one Super Bowl, is if the Lions can win a Super Bowl with or without Jared Goff, even from that trade, I think the Lions can say they won that Matthew Stafford trade, because Stafford's probably going to be out of the league in a couple of years. Also notable, the Lions nailed their first 4 draft picks in the 2023 draft with Jahmyr Gibbs, Sam Laporta, and Brian Branch as the top 3 from their class. I believe they also have one of the brightest futures in the league. And if Jared Goff can continue to play well, the Lions might be Super Bowl contenders this year and going forward. So kudos to the Lions for building a pretty good team. Now let's see if you can sustain it and be true Super Bowl contenders. Second place in the NFC North, sitting at 5-4, is the Minnesota Vikings. It's been a roller coaster of a year for the Vikings, to say the least, but they started the season 1-4, and currently they're on a 4-game win streak. So season around so far. Now there's still a long way to go. They've only played 9 games, and they have played their last 4 without superstar wide receiver, arguably the best receiver in the league, Justin Jefferson. Now, good news for Viking fans, he was activated from IR this week, which means he can come back anytime in the next 3 weeks. So that's good news. But we just don't know exactly when he's going to return. But at some point, he should be returning this season. Now, bad news for the Minnesota Vikings: they lost Kirk Cousins to a season-ending Achilles injury. Kirk Cousins was playing some of the best football of his career. He might have been playing the best football, but definitely one of his best seasons through 7 games that he played. Kirk Cousins was doing a heck of a job, and sorry for Kirk. I like him as a player. He's a good guy off the field. I watched that quarterback documentary on Netflix. Kirk is a great dude, and I hope he can come back from this. I know he's got a few more good years to show us in the NFL, and I hope to see Kirk Cousins on a football field next year, whether it's with the Vikings or someone else. But moving back to the Vikings, their defense has improved, and they could sneak into a playoff spot. But I think the Vikings, even if they're a fringe playoff team, I think because they lost Kirk Cousins, maybe they sneak into the wild card round and then probably lose. Maybe they get to the divisional round, but I don't see any chance they get past the divisional round. But the Vikings' biggest problem could be Justin Jefferson is only under contract through 2024, and if they don't sign him, I think they're in a world of trouble because he's a top 5 player in the NFL. So the Vikings are in the playoff hunt, 5-4. Let's see what they have in store for us for the rest of the year. And hats off to the trade they made, Josh Dobbs. He's their new starter. Dobbs has been a top 10 fantasy quarterback this season. I'm a fantasy guy. Ask me fantasy questions if you like. Hit me up here or on Twitter. My link is in my bio, and I'll answer your fantasy questions as well. As I was saying, Josh Dobbs, he's been a nice player, best season of his career. We'll see if Dobbs is with the Vikings after this year or maybe a starter somewhere else. But hats off to Josh Dobbs for having a breakout season, and he'll probably keep the Vikings in the hunt the rest of the year. And honestly, I hope he leads them to the playoffs. Third place in the NFC North belongs to the Green Bay Packers. At 3-5, full-time quarterback starter Jordan Love has been, in my mind, played disappointing football so far. Jordan Love has been okay at QB, though I don't think he has enough weapons around him. It also does not help that his best player on offense, in my mind, Aaron Jones, has not performed well when healthy, and he's also had a ton of injuries to derail his production. Packers, in my opinion, need a true number 1 wide receiver, as Christian Watson has been hurt and also not produced very well for them. They've really had poor offensive line play. Their defense has been okay, maybe middle of the pack to a bottom ranked defense in the league. A big question for them is, have they seen enough from Jordan Love to know if he's the long-term quarterback, or will they look to draft his replacement in 2024 and let them sit the bench, as they gave Jordan Love a nice little raise for this year and next year. So he'll definitely be their quarterback for the remainder of this year and next year as long as he's healthy. So they got some tough decisions coming up, some veterans that may get released, things of that nature. And also, I think they have a big question to answer. Is Matt LaFleur the answer to their long-term coach? In my opinion, he should be on the hot seat because without Aaron Rodgers, to me, Jordan Love doesn't look that great, and he had plenty of time to sit and learn from Aaron Rodgers. And also, if Matt LaFleur can't prove anything without a Hall of Fame quarterback to show that he's a good coach, is he your long-term coach for the future? And also, the Packers are likely to miss the playoffs for a second consecutive season. You know that doesn't sit well with Green Bay fans with a rich history. So Packers have some big looming questions to deal with this offseason. as they're likely, as I said, to miss the playoffs for a second consecutive year, as that does not sit well with the Green Bay faithful. Last up in the NFC North is the Chicago Bears. These Chicago Bears. They played their 10th game of the season on Thursday night. They beat the Panthers in an ugly, ugly football game. That was one of the worst Thursday night games of the year to improve their record to 3-7. It's been a disappointing season to say the least for Chicago as they upgraded some of their roster in free agency. Bears fans had crazy expectations for their team in the offseason. They were a little too high expectations. They were thinking Super Bowl, Super Bowl. And I said to buddies of mine, they're not necessarily Bears fans. The Bears will be improved this year, but not that much improved. You don't go from number one overall pick to Super Bowl winning team in one off season. That would take a lot of things to go right and a lot of cards to fall your way in one season. The Bears did upgrade with Montez Sweat at the trade deadline. He's a good player, will help their defensive line and their defensive pass rush, and should help their defense overall. The Bears, in my opinion, two biggest holes on the team are quarterback Justin Fields. I don't think he's the answer. 11th overall pick in 2021. This is his third year. He has a horrible record as starting quarterback. He hasn't played since week 6. And also, to break it to you, Bears fans who may think Fields is the answer, Tyson Bagent, who has only started a handful of games for the Bears, has 2 wins on the year. As I mentioned, the Bears have 3, and they're 3-7. Well, Justin Fields has started more games than Bagent, and he only has 1 win on the year. So that's a major question because until about a month ago, I didn't even know who the Bears' backup quarterback was. So kudos to Tyson Bagent. Keep balling out. Well, not quite balling out, but keep playing well, and he might beat Justin Fields out. Now, I still think the Bears need to draft a quarterback in this next draft at the top of the draft, as they very well could own the number 1 pick because they own Carolina's pick because of the trade, so Carolina could draft Bryce Young number 1 overall. And then the other question mark for the Bears is Matt Eberflus. He looks lost on the sideline. I wasn't a fan of the hire when he got hired a couple seasons ago. And like I said, he looks lost on the sideline. He looks confused. He just looks outmatched out there. So, Bears fans, I think you need a new quarterback and definitely a new head coach to go along with him. And for the second consecutive year, you could very well own the number 1 pick. Just maybe not trade it away this year. I think maybe you should have drafted Bryce Young or CJ Stroud. Now, I know you got DJ Moore out of that trade, but I personally would have kept the number 1 pick and then gone from there. But hey, Bears ownership thought differently. So, Bears fans, you're probably not going to be in the playoffs unless you get a stud quarterback in the draft this year. Likely to miss you're going to miss the playoffs again this season, and well, good luck in 2024. And until you get a quarterback, you probably have some more losing seasons on the horizon in the near future. To the top of the NFC South at 5-4 through 9 weeks. They are improved over last season with Derek Carr as the quarterback now in New Orleans. Though, if I'm being realistic, they should probably win the division as they're not Super Bowl contenders. I think that's far-fetched to say, but they are an improved team over last year as they have played well. They could very well be 6-3 had they not choked away the game against the Texans at NRG a few weeks ago. Getting Alvin Kamara back has really helped Derek Carr after his 3-game suspension with all his legal troubles a couple of years ago. He's provided a much-needed boost to their offense, and I think the Saints are going to win the division, probably have a winning record, 9-8. Maybe they squeeze together a 10-7 season. But the Saints, what they have going for them for the rest of the year, they have a soft schedule. Over the final 8 games, they only played 2 games against winning teams as of right now with that have a winning record. So the Saints have a soft schedule, and they're in the driver's seat to win the division and make the playoffs for the first time in 3 seasons. Place in the NFC South, 1 game behind the Saints, or the 4-5 Falcons. Now, Falcon fans, you're an intriguing team to talk about, but I would say for more of the wrong reasons, as I know most Falcon fans and most fantasy fans who own any sort of Falcons player, notable Falcons player to actually own. There's three of them: Drake London, Kyle Pitts, and Bijan Robinson. All three top 10 picks in the past three drafts for the Atlanta Falcons. Well, the Falcon fans are furious, and I don't blame them because Arthur Smith, their head coach, hardly uses three top 10 picks. And I believe all three were worthy of top 10 picks, but he hardly uses his three best players. So if you're Falcon fans, I understand your frustration. If I had them in fantasy or I was a Falcons fan, I'd be livid over my head coach and I'd be losing sleep over it as well. Because if you have three top 10 picks in three straight drafts, and to me, they can all be great contributors to the team, and they're just not being utilized well. I think the Falcons could easily be a 6-3 or a 7-2 team. I think they're highly talented. Now they do have a deficiency in my mind at quarterback. Desmond Ritter or Taylor Heineke is not a long-term answer, but they are 5-4. They have scrapped together some wins, won a couple of ugly games, and good for the Falcons. I tip my cap to them as they have a solid foundation. Now, if they had a quarterback and a head coach who utilized his best weapons offensively, they probably score another anywhere from 3 to 10 points a game. But hey, to each their own. Good news for Falcon fans is maybe if your season tanks from here and ownership is too upset and y'all raise hell with the NFL and all over social media, maybe you can get Arthur Smith fired. He's clearly a stubborn head coach trying to win. I understand trying to win his way, but you're not utilizing your best players. I'm not saying you have to give them the ball every play. I'm just saying if you maybe utilize your top 10 picks, you'd probably win a couple more games. But hey, that's for you to decide, not me. I'm not a Falcons fan. But if I were, and I'm still rooting for this, I'm rooting for Arthur Smith to get fired because I think it'd be cool if the Falcons broke out and we could really truly see what Drake London, Kyle Pitts, and Bijan Robinson could do, and not just small spurts of one game they have a touchdown and 90 yards, and then the next game, Bijan Robinson gets one carry, for instance. So I hope Arthur Smith gets fired. I think he's one of the worst coaches in the NFL. So good luck, Falcon fans. Hope it works out for you, and maybe y'all can get Arthur Smith's badge packed and see if y'all can get him fired. Third place in the NFC South belongs to the 3-5 Tampa Bay Buccaneers. In Week 10, they need a win to keep their playoff hopes alive. In my mind, they play the Tennessee Titans, who are not a great team. So I think it's a winnable game, and we'll see if Tampa Bay comes out on top in that game. Tampa Bay, as I said, they're 3-5, though they did begin the season on fire with the 3-1 start. But since then, they've dropped 4 in a row. Now, I would say there's three big questions that need to be addressed with Tampa Bay. Number one, can Todd Bowles be your head coach of the future? They're headed for their second consecutive losing season since NFL legend Tom Brady retired. Todd Bowles commands a career record of 37-55 as a head coach. That's not a good record, to say the least. Currently, I don't think Bowles is on the hot seat as of right now, though if they collapse the rest of the year, possibly Todd Bowles could get fired, though I think he will get one more season as coach in Tampa Bay at least. Now, if he had a good year next year, he could probably stay on for a few more seasons. But as of right now, Todd Bowles should be on the fringe of whether he's on the hot seat. So enough about Todd Bowles, though. We're going to get to, at least they've had a breakout running back, young stud of Rachaad White. He's having a nice second season and his first season as a full-time starter. Also, to get back to my three keys for Tampa Bay, notable, Mike Evans is showing no signs of slowing down. He's in his 10th season, looking for his 10th straight 1,000-yard receiving season, which is an NFL record, going into a likely second straight missed playoff berth. They really need to re-sign Mike Evans in the offseason, as if he walks in free agency, I think Tampa Bay's in a lot of trouble. Him and Chris Godwin are two of the better receivers in the league, and they're a top 5 wide receiver duo in the NFL. And then lastly, Baker Mayfield's on a 1-year contract. So I think Baker's played solid. He does have two really nice weapons on the outside to utilize. And Tampa Bay just needs to decide. Do you give Baker a 1 or 2 year deal after that and see if he can at least be a bridge quarterback? Or do you give him a 3 year deal, something of that nature? But they need to figure out if they have their franchise QB in the building or if they need to draft another QB coming up in the next year or two. So Tampa Bay's kind of in my opinion, no man's land right now. I know they've had some injuries and things of that nature, but to me, Tampa Bay is kind of yes, no, where are they at? You don't really know. So, not really where you want to be in any sport. Last in the NFC South, the last place team, the Carolina Panthers, they're tied for the worst record in football at 1-8. Their loss to the Chicago Bears on Thursday night put them at 1-8. In the 2023 draft, this same Panthers team traded up number one to select Bryce Young. While they gave up a king's ransom to acquire him, I think that Carolina definitely overpaid, and they believe they have their guy in Bryce Young. But the problem is, Bryce Young has not played up to the standards of a number one pick. Now, you don't always have to be the best player in the league or anything like that, but there's several problems with the Carolina Panthers that need to be addressed. Number one, Miles Sanders has been atrocious, and the Panthers gave him, for running back standards, a bag of money, and he's now been demoted to running back number two behind Chuba Hubbard. Chuba Hubbard's a solid NFL player, but like Miles Sanders, the way he's playing right now, neither one of them are franchise running backs. They're going to need to figure out the running back situation. Also, another huge issue for the Panthers is the best wide receiver on your team is 33-year-old Adam Thielen. He's having I would still call it a breakout year, even though he's had some nice years in Minnesota. He's having a great season for being age 33. Now, the issue is who else is going to help him out? As I heard the stat on Thursday, he's got over, it was either 30 or 40 more catches than the next closest receiver on the Carolina Panthers. That's a major problem. Now, they did draft Jonathan Mingo in the most recent draft that they drafted Bryce Young this past draft, but he's been a large no show. I know he's been hurt a little bit, things like that. So Carolina really needs to find some receivers and some kind of a better running back to help out Bryce Young. They also need offensive line help, but I don't even think that's Carolina's biggest concern. To me, their biggest concern and their biggest issue is the head coach, Frank Wright. He was signed to be their head coach before they drafted Bryce Young. Carolina, I think Frank Wright is hurting Bryce Young's potential as of right now. Just like Trevor Lawrence's first year, he had Urban Meyer, and that was a disaster. I think Carolina might need to consider firing Frank Wright after his first season or even during the season because Carolina's 1-8. And Bryce Young, I don't want to say he looks awful as quarterback, but you drafted him number one overall, and I'm sure Carolina had a little bit higher hopes for Bryce. Now, I know he's been banged up a little bit, things like that. But if you look at it, Bryce Young has been a bottom 10 starting quarterback in the league easily. And you could maybe even argue he's been a bottom 5 quarterback in the league. That means he's maybe quarterback 27, 28, 29 at his starters, roughly in that range, maybe even 30 to 32. That's rough. So I think that has to account somebody has to be held accountable for that. And maybe that's Frank Wright. Maybe that's offensive coordinator Josh McCown. But somebody needs to be held accountable for in Carolina. And things have been ugly this season. I don't see them improving with a lot of draft capital they gave up in the most recent draft anytime soon. I think some dark days are ahead for Carolina fans. So the only thing you can hope for is they spend money, a lot of money in free agency, maybe try to fix some of the holes on the team, and also maybe get another coach. If you do, you don't, to each their own. But they definitely need to get Bryce Young some help because, not to say Bryce Young looks lost out there, but hey, he needs some help in Carolina. The last of the 4 divisions in the NFC, we're going to be talking about the NFC West. We're going to start with the tied for first place, 5-3 San Francisco 49ers. They're tied with Seattle, who I will get to next. They're coming off of a bye as they travel to Jacksonville to play their Week 10 game. San Francisco was the most impressive team in the league, starting 5-0 through the first 5 weeks of the year. And I mentioned their current record is 5-3. The problem is, since starting 5-0, they've lost three in a row. The last 3 weeks, they've looked lost, and you can argue Brock Purdy might have had a concussion during those weeks, but yet somehow he was still able to play all 3 of those weeks. I saw multiple videos where he might have sustained the concussion, yet I don't remember ever seeing he was officially put in concussion protocol. And the majority of players who get put in concussion protocol usually have to miss 1 to 2 weeks. So I'm not sure how they got away with that, but I think Brock Purdy played at least 1 to 2 weeks, and a potential part of the first game where he suffered a concussion with the concussion and nothing was done about it. So that could be leading to the 49ers drop off in the last 3 weeks. But also, another huge problem for them has been they lost defensive coordinator DeMeco Ryans to the Texans, who is their now head coach. And I think their defense has seen a major drop off. Number 2 overall pick from several years ago, Nick Bosa, where did he go? He got his big contract right before the year, and I think the problem with him was he's been out of shape and he hasn't shown up at all this season. Nick Bosa, you got your money. Are you going to disappear for the rest of your career now? You need to step up. The rest of the 49ers defense needs to step up for this team to look like a Super Bowl contender again. So they need Brock Purdy to, I'm sure with the bye week, he's healed up. Hopefully, he's past his concussion situation, and we'll see if he is or not. They should be getting either this week or next week Deebo Samuel back, so that'll help the 49ers as well. They're going to be tested against the 6-2 Jaguars, who are division leaders, who I'll talk about next week, this Sunday. So the 49ers, it's either Super Bowl or bust, just like it was last year. You've got one of the highest payrolls in football. You're paying all your defensive players, so they need to show up. The team needs to show up, and we'll see if this 49ers team in the second half of the season can be better and get back to what they hope is their dreams of hoisting another Lombardi trophy. The second place Seattle Seahawks, well, really tied for first, are next up at 5-3. As I mentioned, they're tied with the 49ers. With recently paged Geno Smith leading the charge, they have put themselves in position to make the playoffs for a second consecutive season. I don't believe Seattle has a Super Bowl bound team, but I think they are a good team. I think they're a piece or two away, and I do think they will make the playoffs, though a question mark in my mind is, can Geno Smith lead a team further than a wild card round exit? Remains to be seen, as this season he's more or less been a middle of the pack quarterback so far, and Seattle needs him to be closer to at least the top 12, 14 quarterback, even right at the 10th ranked quarterback, for them to have a chance and possibly be outside Super Bowl contenders or dark horse Super Bowl contenders. What Seattle does have going for them is they have one of the better defenses in the league, and they also might have the best wide receiver core in the league with DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, and emerging rookie Jackson Smith Njigba. The offensive line has been okay. Kenneth Walker has had his good games and his bad games, though he's had more good than bad. Seattle's got a good roster, and they're capable of making a playoff run with their good defense, as I mentioned. And if Geno Smith can take his game to another level and replicate his play for last year, maybe Seattle is one of the dark horse teams in the NFL to make a Super Bowl run. The third place team with a 3-6 record through 9 games are the LA Rams. They started the season 2-2. The issue is they've gone 1-4 since. Coming off of a 5-12 season last year, the 2022 Rams, I would say they've improved over last season, though since winning the Super Bowl, their franchise and their team has kind of fallen off a cliff. It's been nothing but downhill since then, and we're a season and a half later. They went all out for the one Super Bowl, and they gave up a lot of future assets, and a lot of veteran players have left them since then. And since falling off that cliff, they're trying to recover from it. And we'll see if they can possibly make another Super Bowl run with the current core they have. That probably only has a couple years left, a couple good years if that, left in them, as they have 35-year-old quarterback Matthew Stafford. How many years does he have left? How many years did Aaron Donald have left? Because both of them have contemplated retirement in recent years. So they've got a couple of looming questions over them. And also, how much longer is Sean McVay going to coach? I think that's a major thing to be addressed, as he's under contract through 2026, and from the reports I read, say he wants to continue coaching, but I know he's contemplated retirement. So the Rams are kind of a mess right now, though I think one good offseason could have them back in the playoffs in 2024. So we'll see if the Rams next year can get back into the playoffs. It would take a heck of a run for them to make it this year. They're definitely on the way outside looking in. So Rams, you can probably look forward to next season and just hope Aaron Donald and Sean McVay don't retire on you, because if they retire on you before their contracts are up, you can probably kiss being any kind of ideal competitive for a few more seasons on top of where you're at now. You can probably kiss that goodbye. So good luck to the Rams in the draft. If you have any picks left, I don't know how deep they went into their pool of trading future picks, but if you have your picks coming up, well, you better hope you draft well, because your window is probably pretty short lived, as a lot of your better players, Cooper Kupp, Matthew Stafford, and Aaron Donald, are all on the wrong side of 30. The final team in the NFC, tied with Carolina for the worst record in the NFL, of course, is the Arizona Cardinals. Like Carolina, they host a 1-8 record headed into Week 10 of the 2023 season. With their offseason moves, it's evident that Arizona is tanking, and their 2023 season has just been pissed away. They do hold 2 first-round picks in the 2024 draft, their own, which is good for them because they're going to need a top pick. And they also hold the Houston Texans pick, which they acquired in a trade during the 2023 draft, which Houston traded up to select Will Anderson Jr. So that's the good news for Arizona. You own 2 first-round picks, and hopefully with those picks, for Arizona's sake, you can start to upgrade this roster that needs some major help. They have one of the least talented rosters in the league, as they made a couple of questionable cuts and a couple of trades of players that were projected to be starters. They traded Josh Jones to the Houston Texans, who was, I believe, predicted to be a starter for them, and they didn't get much for him. And then they traded safety slash linebacker Isaiah Simmons to the New York Giants. So not really sure where Arizona's going. New head coach Jonathan Gannon has his work cut out for him, coming over from the Philadelphia Eagles to be their head coach. Their biggest decision to be made is Kyler Murray. He's returning this week from his torn ACL last season. I wish the best for him. Torn ACLs are a nasty thing to happen to anybody, and we will see if they still believe Kyler Murray is a franchise quarterback with a change in coach. Usually coaches will, more times than not, unless the quarterback is in place, Kyler's been there for a few years, decide to change quarterbacks. That's his authority. So we'll see if Arizona drafts a quarterback in the 2024 draft. I think Kyler Murray's had plenty of time to try to prove he's a franchise quarterback. I don't believe he's a franchise quarterback. So Arizona's got, as I said, their work cut out for him. I think they need to hit the full reset button, maybe trade Kyler Murray, maybe cut him, take that cap hit if you have to, and just full on hit a reset button, because you need to start somewhere, and Arizona right now is going nowhere fast. So as I finished all the NFC teams, thank you for watching. This was your rest of the NFC season, what to look forward to, what to potentially not look forward to. If you're some fans, I will have an AFC video coming out next week. Don't forget to like and comment on my video if you prefer. Maybe we can chat. If you want to chat about fantasy football, hit me up here on YouTube with some questions, or hit me up on X, formerly known as Twitter. The link is in my bio. Also, don't forget to subscribe to my channel, as like I said, I'll have an AFC link, or excuse me, an AFC video coming out next week. So all you AFC fans, your teams are coming up next week, and I'll see y'all in the next video.